Welcome everybody on this New Year's Eve. At the stroke of midnight tonight, the old year will pass, a new one will start. Sometimes even a year seems a long time. And yet, here we are in this living tradition of Gautama the Buddha, more than 2,500 years after his passing away. How is this possible? What's a tradition? Tradition, it's an old Latin word, traditum. It means something that's bequeathed, something that's passed on, typically from generation to generation. It might be a piece of knowledge, an understanding, a scientific discovery. It might be a skill, a technique, a way of doing things. And for us, it's both. The knowledge, the discovery, was Buddha's own discovery of Dhamma, Buddha's words, pariyatti. And the technique, of course, is patipatti, our technique of vipassana. And over those 2,500 years, generation after generation, teacher to pupil, here it is, intact. How is that possible? Tonight we'll look at the challenges which Dhamma met over that period of time, the difficulties, the disasters, the dead ends, and how each time what appeared to be a disaster, Dhamma rose to the occasion and often emerged more resilient, stronger, and more widely spread than ever before. Let's start at the beginning with Gautama the Buddha. As you know, he was a royal prince, raised in all luxury, in the royal household. His father, the king, didn't want him to go out and become an ascetic. He wanted him to stay and be king. And yet, as he went out from time to time, he saw the four great signs. He went out with his charioteer and saw a sick man. And then he saw an old man or an old person. And then he saw a corpse, and he's shocked. And he says to the charioteer, "Will this happen to me?" And the charioteer says, "Yes, sir, it will happen to you and me. There's no escape." And then on the fourth excursion, he sees an ascetic, a monk. He questions him. The monk says, "I'm looking for the truth, the way out." And Gautama knows what he has to do. Leaves the householder's life and starts looking for the truth. And he comes across all kinds of difficulties. He tries different things. He tries the jhanas, deep, deep concentrations, so deep we cannot even imagine them today. And yet he finds no change. And there was a tradition, a belief in those days, that if you tortured the body, if you put it through real hard ascetic practices, you could come out of your craving for the body. He tried all that. He tried, as he's put it, holding his breath till he felt as if knives were cutting his head. He starved himself down to 1 grain of rice a day so that he could hardly put one foot in front of the other, fell down as if dead. Luckily he revived. And then he looks inside with this powerful mind and realizes no change, nothing. So he makes a brave decision. He gives up all that, starts eating again, starts building up his strength. At which point his 5 companions leave him. They think he's failed. They think he couldn't sustain the ascetic practices. So that night, the moonlit, full moon night of May, sits under the Bodhi tree, and at that point he's reached a complete dead end, an apparent failure. He's got no home, he left his home. He's got no friends, they've left him. He's got no teacher, no technique. He just sits down with that determination, I am not going to move till I've discovered the truth. And then he remembers, as a child, he practiced Anapana. He starts again. Gains deep concentration. But instead of just going into a blissful stage, he starts using that deep concentration to examine his own mind, his own body, the interaction of the two, understands the paticca samuppada, the whole chain of causation, from ignorance down to dukkha and rebirth, comes out, having broken that chain, an enlightened person. So out of that dead end comes this enlightened person, and then he decides, I will go and teach this technique to those 5 companions. I'll give Dhamma to them. He finds them. And now another difficulty. They don't believe him. They don't think he's enlightened. As far as they're concerned, he's failed. But they think, well, all right, he's the prince of the country, we'll give him a seat. He sits down, he starts convincing them, really, I'm enlightened. And he gives that famous first discourse, the Dhammacakka. And he talks about realities, the Eightfold Noble Path, the Four Noble Truths. And these, he said, these are things I have never heard before. And in me, knowledge arose, light arose, wisdom arose. And there is no more birth for me. And they start practicing. And all 5 of them, soon afterwards, become arahants themselves. And they're joined by their friends. More come, they all practice, and in the end he's surrounded by 60 arahants. And then he takes the next stage. Famous words, he tells them, Charita bhikkhave charikang, go forth bhikkhus, bahujana hitai, for the benefit of many. Lokanu kampai, out of compassion for the world. So he sends them forth, and he says, teach Dhamma. And so they go, and then we find, over this quite long period of time while he's alive, these decades, Dhamma becomes strongly established in northern India, in the Ganges basin. And sooner or later, of course, Gautama the Buddha passes away. And the first thing they do, or one of the first things they do afterwards, is they hold a great big convocation, the first great council to remember, purify, and check all his teachings. Those of you who've taken a Satipatthana course will remember how Ananda famously joined that conference. Ananda, who had been with Buddha for 25 years, who could remember all his discourses, he became an arahant at the very last minute and could join the conference. And so here we find this close link, and we'll see it all the way through, between Pariyatti, the words, and the teaching. And now, armed with this corrected, purified words of Buddha, they go out, they teach, and it spreads strongly. And it goes on like this for a couple of centuries, Dhamma spreading, Dhamma very strong. And then another apparent disaster. A monarch, his name is Ashoka, ascends the throne of Magadha, right in the heartland of Dhamma. And he's cruel, he's bloodthirsty. His nickname was Chanda Ashoka, Ashoka the Cruel. He's intent on expanding his empire. He's gained the throne through the death. He killed his own brothers to gain the throne. And now he wants to expand his empire further. He invades some small country, the Kalingas, on his eastern borders. They've fought off his father before him. This time he sends a huge army, and the instruction is, show no mercy. And they show none. And the casualties on that day were 100,000 people in one battle. And when you compare that with the population of that day, that was massive. And not only that, but the collateral damage, you might call it, the exile, the further deaths from disease, post-traumatic wounds, whatever it might be, were much more than that. Maybe 250,000 people were died or displaced. And then out of this disaster comes Dhamma. Ashoka, it is said, he's walking the battlefield, seeing the piles of the dead, the groaning of the wounded. The story goes that a woman comes up to him. She's a Kalingan woman. And she says to him, "Sir, as a result of your actions, I've lost my father, I've lost my husband, I've lost my brother. Now what will I do?" Maybe the remorse started then. Later on, he sees a monk walking so calmly, and he realizes this monk has got a peace that at this rate I will never know. It is said actually that this monk, who was an Arahant, his name was Nigrodha, and he was actually the son of Ashoka's eldest brother, whom he'd killed to get the throne. The monk teaches him Dhamma, and he starts practicing very seriously, goes on long retreats himself, and emerges as Dhamma Ashoka, now a totally different person. And you can see here from these edicts, what king would normally express his regret at his own conquests? What king would be so honest about initially his own lack of progress in Dhamma and then finally his real progress? And he becomes an ideal ruler. So from Chanda Ashoka, we get Dhamma Ashoka. Probably he started the first welfare state that we know about. He talks about treating his subjects like his children. He provides free medicine. He builds rest houses, free government rest houses along the main highways. He plants trees. He protects animals. He issues a long list of protected animal species and forbids any hunting. Even for prisoners, he has general amnesties. There's one proclamation he gives. In his 26th year of his reign, he says, "In 25 out of 26 years, I've had a general amnesty for all my prisoners." And for relations with his neighbors, he's no longer fighting them. He's giving them foreign aid. So friendly. So that's at the mundane level. But at the Dhamma level, he's strongly supporting the Sangha. It is said he built 84,000 monasteries or viharas to support them. But even then, and maybe because life was so easy in the Sangha, some trouble started, some discipline problems started, and maybe there were disputes as well. And so to solve these, Ashoka decides to hold the third great council. The second had been held a century or so before, because he wants again to purify the teachings, make sure there's no disputes, no problems, everything is corrected and perfect in them. And he wants it to be chaired by his own teacher, an Arahant, Moggaliputta Tissa. And there's a problem, a difficulty. Moggaliputta Tissa, he's gone off for a 7-year retreat into the Himalayas. Ashoka sends a message, "Please come down and chair my conference, my council." And this is 600 monks, thousands of lay people, all waiting. No response. Sends another message. No response. So in the end, Ashoka says to some people around him, "Take a boat, go up the Ganges and just get him, bring him." And so Moggaliputta Tissa is brought, chairs the conference. It's very successful. The words of Buddha are again memorized to perfection. And now he thinks, well, all right, Dhamma is sorted in this part of northern India, in my kingdom. What about other countries? And he starts sending his, what he calls his Dhamma dutas, his Dhamma messengers, to various other places. And one of the first places was Sri Lanka. He actually sent his own son and his own daughter Mahinda and Sanghamitta to Sri Lanka at the request of the King of Sri Lanka, with whom he had very friendly relations. And they founded a strong Sangha, both monks and nuns, and Sri Lanka became a real stronghold, an island of Dhamma for centuries. And it made another great contribution. Actually, some years, maybe a century or more later, the fourth great conference was held in Sri Lanka. And why? Again, a disaster which actually resulted in a greater spread of Dhamma. For 1, maybe 2 years, the harvests were bad, the crops failed, people were starving. And the monks started starving because the people couldn't feed them. And some of the monks were dying of starvation. And they thought to themselves, well, the Tipitaka, that's the words of Buddha, are all memorized. We need to write them down, because otherwise these people who've memorized it, they may die and will lose Buddha's words. So actually they wrote it all down, and here's an example. It was all done on palm leaves. So that was Sri Lanka, and as a result of that writing down, later we find that the written text could go to Burma, and we'll see the results of that later. Another area where Ashoka's Dhammadutas went was northwest. Now you might remember that a century or so earlier, Alexander the Great had come from Macedonia, conquered a huge swathe of territory, all the way from Asia Minor, modern Turkey, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, even through to India and down to Egypt as well. He conquered all those areas and left behind Hellenistic kingdoms, the Indo-Greeks. And one of these areas, one of these kingdoms was Gandhara. And we find a wonderful testament or evidence of the strength of Dhamma in that area. It's a beautiful text. I strongly recommend it to you. It's called The Questions of King Milinda. Now Milinda, his Greek name was Menander, a powerful king, a very smart king, and his empire extended in even parts of India. And of course he was a Greek, but he was very aware of Dhamma and of the monks. And being a very smart guy, he loved to question the monks and torment them with all his questions, and usually reduced him to silence, to apoplexy. And he enjoyed this. And the monks were very troubled. They said, well, there's no one who can debate with this guy. And then finally this senior monk, Nagasena, comes along. And these questions of King Milinda are a record of this dialogue. Nagasena meets Milinda, and Milinda says, what's your name? And Nagasena, the Venerable Nagasena, an Arahant apparently, said, well, sir, my name is Nagasena, but actually there's no person, there's no reality behind this name. It's just a convention, a name. And straight away, Milinda goes on to the attack. He says, oh, so you say there's no reality here? Well, who is it who takes robes? Who is it who keeps Shila? Who is it to whom if we give something, we earn merit? And if we murder you, if we kill you, there's no demerit if there's no person there. What do you say to that? And then he goes on. He says, well, this body, is it Nagasena? He says, no, sir. These sensations, are they Nagasena? No, sir. Sanya? No, sir. Are your sankharas? Milinda is familiar with all these words. No, sir. What about the vijnana, the consciousness? No, sir. Are they all together? No, sir. Are they something separate? No, sir. And Milinda says, well, Nagasena, you told me a lie. You said that someone called Nagasena came here, but I find no Nagasena at all. And then Nagasena turns on Milinda, and he says, oh, sir, you're a royal king, You live in luxury, you live in royal luxury. Your body must be very tender. The ground outside, it's very hard, it's very rough. Had you walked on that ground, it would have troubled you, I'm sure. How did you come? And Melinda said, well, of course I didn't walk. I came on the royal chariot. Oh, and what's a chariot? Are the wheels the chariot? No. Is the yoke the chariot? No. Is the frame the chariot? The reins? The spokes of the wheels? He answers to all of them to no. So are these all combined in one? Are they the chariot? No. So we find that chariot is just a word. I find no reality. Your Majesty, you've told me a lie. You said you came in a chariot. There's no chariot that I can find. And Melinda's defeated. And he's humiliated. And now he reaches some sense and he says, well, all right, may we debate again tomorrow? I have so many more questions to ask you. And Nagasena says, well, yes, I'm happy to come tomorrow, but only if we debate like scholars on a rational, reasonable basis, a respectful basis. And Melinda says, yes, all right. Next day, Nagasena comes with all his monks, his retinue of monks. Melinda feeds them, takes a lower seat next to Nagasena and asks him all these questions, and they're beautiful questions. What is Panya? What is Shila? What is Samadhi? Explain this, explain that. Nagasena gives some wonderful examples. Just for instance, he says, what is Shila? What is the function of Shila? Oh, Shila is the foundation from which every other good quality goes. Give me an example. Shila is like the earth from which all plants grow. And so all these wonderful examples which show that Dhamma was very strong at that time. Now, another legacy which these Indo-Greeks gave us was beautiful sculptures. Of course, they're not directly part of Dhamma. And you might have seen the Athenian sculptures in the past of gods, of athletes. So now we have beautiful sculptures of the Buddha. Two of them were enormous. You might have heard of them, the Bamiyan sculptures. And you can see the size of them carved in the earth. And again, a sad thing, a disaster, unfortunately. They were destroyed, dynamited. But even from that, something good came. Because after they'd been destroyed, dynamited, some caves were discovered behind them. And in those caves, 200 manuscripts, all sealed up, birch bark manuscripts, and they were manuscripts of the scriptures. One of them, for instance, is the famous Anatthalakkhana Sutta, which was given to the first 5 disciples of the Buddha, after which they all became arahants. So we find a very strong evidence of Dhamma in this area. And of course, this area, Gandhara, was on the trade routes between China and Europe, a wonderful position from which Dhamma could be spread in both directions, both to China and even through to Europe. And now we come to Burma. Again, Ashoka sent his Dhammadutas to Burma. Actually, this picture, of course, is the Shwedagon, the famous pagoda in Yangon, the largest pagoda in the world, can be seen from space. And it turns out that the very first people who Gautama the Buddha met after his enlightenment were actually Burmese. They were 2 Burmese traders who happened to be passing that way. They didn't take Dhamma, they didn't ask for the teaching, but they offered him food, the first food since his enlightenment, Burmese rice cakes and honey, and they asked for some memento. They were so impressed with his dignity, his bearing, his vibration, the calm, the serenity of his face. May we please, sir, have something to remember you by. So he takes 8 hairs from his head, gives them to them, and says, you can remember me by this. And those 8 hairs are the Buddha relics at the center of the Shwedagon today. Of course, when they first built it, it wasn't like that. It was only 27 feet high, but went higher over the years. And so it went on. One of them Balika he was called, it is said, actually went back to India, took robes, and became an Arahant at that time. But now we're talking centuries later, Ashoka sending these two Arahants, Sona and Uttara, to Burma, and the prediction of his teacher was this golden land, Burma, it was called Savannah Bhumi in those days, golden land, can keep this gem of Dhamma. That was the prediction. And of course, it wasn't that the practice and the teaching remained strong all the time. They didn't. There are times when it dwindled, almost got lost, but didn't. For instance, in about the 10th century, we find two kingdoms in Burma, Bagan in the north, Taton in the south. Bagan has basically lost the technique. There are monks, but they're not even keeping Shila. No real practice. And so this monk, Shin Arahant, comes all the way from Taton up to Bagan, gives Dhamma to King Anarwata, a famous king, a powerful king. He starts spreading his empire. Dhamma goes with him. If ever you get the chance, do go to Bagan. It has hundreds of pagodas. It's a world-famous heritage site just because of all those pagodas there. And Shin Arahant purifies the Sangha there, and he brings over monks from Sri Lanka and the scriptures, because of course now they're written. And so Dhamma is re-established in Burma. And over the coming centuries, many of those scriptures, the Tipitaka was translated. And now we fast forward to Ledi Sayadaw. In between, most of the names are lost in the mists of time. But now, in the 19th century, we find a great flowering of the Sangha in Burma. The king is King Mindon, a wise, kind king, a very devoted king. He has his own meditation practice, a strong supporter of the Sangha. It is said that there were 700,000 monks in Burma at that time, and 80,000 of them were being supported personally by King Mindon in his capital at Mandalay. But it was almost all study of the scriptures. There was some practice in the Sagang Hills near Mandalay. We do hear of one monk who insisted on his novices having a meditation practice before he'd ordained them, but this was quite rare. Most of the monks were just studying. And into this scene walks Ledi Sayadaw. He's a young monk born in a rural village, and he decides to leave his rural village, go to Mandalay. This is where King Mindon is, and he wants to join the Sankyong Taik. Now this is the chief monastery in Mandalay, and partly the reason why the king was so emphatic about protecting Dhamma was a shadow on the horizon, and this shadow was British occupation. Already India was a British colony. Already the British had fought 2 wars with Burma. Even Mandalay, Mindon's capital, was cut off from the sea by British possessions, British-controlled territory, and there was every danger that Britain would take the rest. So here was Mindon trying to shore up the Sangha as far as possible against this British invasion. Sankyong Taik, this monastery, was actually the old royal palace, but Mindon had donated it to the Sangha. Ledi Sayadaw goes there, gains admission, and the chief monk, he's a real heavyweight monk. He was personal tutor to King Mindon. He was a head monk, appointed head monk by Mindon of all Burma, and he was famous for having translated a work, a Sri Lankan work called the Vishuddhimagga, 800 pages, a very venerable work, and he translated that into Burmese. And very soon, Ledi Sayadaw is noticed by this abbot, calls him in, takes him under his wing and says, "You better study with me," and gives him access to his personal library. And that was not a small thing, because remember, all books were handwritten, no printing yet. And Ledi Sayadaw, he's very bright. He studies and he learns the entire Tipitaka, 8,000 pages. And he becomes an expert in Abhidhamma, higher Dhamma, very technical Dhamma, very technical explanations of mind and matter, 5,000 pages. And he becomes a lecturer. He's lecturing to monks. And now, because of the threat of the British invasion, King Mindon decides that he will hold the 5th Great Council, again, to shore up the teachings, to make sure they're perfect. And so the council is held in his royal palace. Many hundred monks attending, something like 600 monks, thousands of householders, and all the words of Buddha are recited, all by different monks. And Ledi Sayadaw, this young monk, is asked to recite a particular book, one book of the Abhidhamma, the 5th book of the Abhidhamma. It's called the Katavatu, the Book of Contentions, actually written by Ashoka's own teacher, centuries back, Moggaliputta Tissa. Talks about all the wrong views and how to refute them. And you can just imagine a young monk standing up, relying only on his memory, in front of several hundred senior monks, textual experts, looking for errors, several thousand householders, and this book is several hundred pages. And he stands up in this clear, beautiful voice he has and recites the whole thing, word perfect, from beginning to end, with no notes, no memory aids, nothing. People were amazed. Later, he was pronounced by King Mindon as the Pattama Satcha, the chief lecturer, and he's lecturing to 2,000 monks every day in Abhidhamma. So right now, he's top of his game. And then again, a disaster. King Mindon dies. His son, who ascends to the throne, Tibor, is a weak character. It is said he never even left the royal compound, quickly lost control of the country. You find provincial governors lining up with robber gangs, all kinds of stuff going on. Riots in the city. And in the end, a great fire sweeps across the northern part of the city, burns down Sankyaung Taik. Ledi Sayadaw loses his home and loses almost all of his books and papers. He's lost everything. So, in the face of this, he retreats back to his local village. And now he actually starts practicing. Before that, he was just a master of his theory. But now, out of this disaster, the blessing in disguise is that now he's practicing. And then the British invade. Tibor unwisely picks a fight with them. They invade. The war lasts 12 days. And then the whole of Burma is in British hands. Tibor is arrested, exiled, taken on a ship, taken in an ox cart. What a humiliation. Down to the ship, shipped off to India, and he never sees his native Burma again. And so, Ledi Sayadaw now retreats further. He retreats into Ledi Forest. You can see there, on the left, that's a picture of Ledi Forest. That's not the picture of the original monastery, that's one of our centers. You can go there, you can absorb all those beautiful vibrations there. And practicing, and of course teaching as well. It's a most successful monastery. But then, after a while, he leaves it, and he decides he'll go on a pilgrimage to India. Visits all the sacred places, that's Bodh Gaya on the right. And again, he's shocked. He's shocked at the neglect and disrepair of the sacred places. Even when he went to Bodh Gaya, he finds a Hindu priest there who's saying, oh no, this is a Hindu sacred site. He sees the power of the British Empire. Any kind of resistance is pointless. And above all, he realizes that there is no respect in India for the Sangha, for the monks. There's little respect for Buddha's teachings. And he realizes that if ever Dhamma is to spread, it can't be through the monks. It will have to be through the householders. And so he returns to Burma, his practice inspired by his pilgrimage to the sacred places, but with these hard truths. And now, realizing that the Sangha is broken, he understands that if Dhamma is to be protected in Burma, it will have to be done by the householders. And the British had adopted a completely neutral attitude to the religion of their colonies. An edict had come out from Queen Victoria herself, saying we will not interfere in the religion of any of our colonies. And this all looked very good and very neutral. But the Sangha was used to the protection of the king. Even a delegation of monks go along to the British governor and say, could you please appoint a chief monk for us? The governor refuses. I'm not doing that. And the British start founding schools. And of course the language is now English. And many of these schools are run by Christians. Although the government is officially neutral, the Christians are running the schools. They're teaching the children to have no respect for the monks, to deride their own parents, to deride their own religion. And if you wanted to get on, pretty much had to go to these schools because you had to learn English, and that was the only way to do so. So now Ledi Sayadaw starts a campaign, crisscrossing the country, giving lectures. And he's a very powerful lecturer. You'll see the quote below from the British governor himself, who had huge respect for Ledi Sayadaw, talking about the adoration of people for this saintly person. He had a wonderful sense of humor. He could hold large audiences rapt with that beautiful voice of his. And now he's teaching Dhamma. Of course, he was an Abhidhamma specialist, but Abhidhamma is very complex. He reduces the whole Abhidhamma, 5,000 pages, down to a single verse, 690 lines, which householders could learn. You even got a little prize if you could learn it, and a picture of Ledi Sayadaw. The householders had been taught, don't worry about meditation. This was the previous attitude. Look, the monks do the meditation. You need the jhanas for that. The monks have to do that. Just keep your shila, give dana, hope for a better life next time. And Ledi Sayadaw was saying, no, practice now. Now is the time to practice. And he's teaching the practice as well. He's teaching Anapana, and he's teaching this reduced, simplified Abhidhamma. Just feel the four great elements within your body, just like Goenkaji teaches it. Earth, air, fire and water. Feel them in your body. You're working with sensations. You're practicing. Now is the time to practice. And so suddenly, from what looked like a great disaster, the British invasion, Dhamma has spread to the householders in a way it could never have done before. And then he goes further. Ledi Sayadaw appoints the first householder teacher. Before that, always the teachers had been monks. The householders were just there to listen, to learn. And this householder teacher, a farmer, a rice farmer, a simple rice farmer, Saya Tet, lived near Yangon, and he had a comfortable, prosperous life. Rice was selling well at the time. The British had opened up the Suez Canal. There was a world trade in rice. He was doing well, had a comfortable family life. And then another disaster. Cholera strikes. Cholera strikes his village. In 2 days, he loses 5 of his family members, including both his children, his son and his daughter. His daughter dies in his arms, saying, "Save me, Daddy, save me." And of course he can't. He's totally devastated, he's grief-struck. And he says to his wife, If there's a way of dying, there must be a way of undying. I'm going to go and find the Dhamma. And she gives him permission. And he goes off, different teachers. He has a companion, U Nyo. They go up and down the country, learning different techniques with different teachers. Finally, he comes across Ledi Sayadaw. And probably for about 7 of those years, he's practicing with Ledi Sayadaw. Ledi Sayadaw is saying, keep practicing your Anapana, keep practicing your Samadhi, Panya will come. But at the end of those 13 years, he feels he's failed. He's hit a dead end. He goes home, very disappointed, doesn't go and live with his wife, goes down to a hole at the bottom of his garden and continues to meditate. And then, as his biography puts it, one day he's sitting there, his samadhi is very strong, and suddenly sensation starts at the top of his head. And he understands, oh, this is anicca. And it spreads to the scalp area, spreads through the whole body, and the whole body is alive with anicca. And suddenly, as his biographer puts it, he understood everything. And now he goes back to Ledi Sayadaw with his wife and her sister to report on his progress. And Ledi Sayadaw immediately appoints him. Take my staff, he says. Go and spread Dhamma, give Dhamma, and teach it to 6,000 students. And then, more than that, Ledi Sayadaw calls his monks the next day, because they're in the monastery. And he says to the monks, look, this is my great student, U Po Thet. He is now a teacher. He can teach like me. So he's elevating Saya Thet to the same level as himself. And maybe only someone of the status and stature of Ledi Sayadaw could have done this and got away with it. And so he says to the monks, take a course from him and take it right now. And so Saya Thet gives his first course to 25 monks, all of whom are far more learned than he is, right there in Ledi Sayadaw's monastery. And from there he goes home with these words ringing in his ears, 6,000 students. He wonders how he's going to do that. And he thinks, maybe I'll have to travel. But then his wife and her sister say, look, you don't have to travel. You've got your hall. You've got your hall at the bottom of the garden. Teach there. We'll expand it for you. We'll look after it. We'll manage the courses. We'll provide the food. You just teach. People will come. And they did. And so Saya Thet starts teaching. And remember, this is the first householder teacher in Burma. And all eyes were on him. What would he be like? Everyone was looking for a mistake. And he led the perfect life as a teacher. Never made any mistake, no controversy. And it wasn't that he was giving standard 10-day courses like we have today. It was much more informal than that. People would just come, stay in his center, and this was the first householder center since the time of the Buddha. And we would find the daily routine quite familiar. He'd come along, he'd check the students, he'd always say to them, stay at least for 7 days, and at least 3 days of those were Anapana. And then he'd give Vipassana as and when they were ready. And then in the evening he'd give a discourse, just like Goenkaji gives discourses on our courses. And this was a man who knew no Pali. He was a householder, he'd never studied it. But people listening to him wouldn't believe it. And the secret was that he knew all Ledi Sayadaw's works by heart. He could quote page, chapter on any work of Ledi Sayadaw's, and he'd quote those, and people were astonished at his learning. And so, here is Saya Thet, householder teacher, prospering. And people came. And here is one person who came, and we all know the story, which Goenkaji tells of how U Ba Khin took his first course. In 1937, U Ba Khin was still a fairly junior clerk in the Accountant General's office, on January the 1st, he went round to a friend of his. And another person who was staying with a friend had just taken a course with Saya Thet. And this friend taught U Ba Khin just a little bit of Anapana. U Ba Khin goes home and just starts practicing informally at home. He hasn't taken a course yet. And he discovers very quickly that his samadhi is so strong that he can play with mental light in front of his eyes in any way he wants. And he realizes, I must do this. And so we know the story of how he requested permission from his seniors. He was threatened. He went away at the risk of his job, at the risk of his career. 8 days later, he took a sampan across the Irrawaddy River, low tide, muddy flats, up to his knees in mud. He walks 8 miles to get to Saya Thet Center, carrying his own bedroll, takes Anapana that night, and his samadhi is so strong that he's given Vipassana the very next day by Saya Thet. As Goenkaji puts it, he reaches giddy heights even in those 7 days, and he's well established. From then on, Saya Thet used to visit him regularly. U Ba Khin also used to go and take courses regularly, and he had group sittings in his house, and when Saya Thet came, he would come to U Ba Khin's house, have the group sits, and he said to his other students, look, you can ask, if you have questions about your meditation, ask U Ba Khin. I'm like the doctor. I may not be here all the time, but U Ba Khin is like the nurse. He's always here. You can ask him. He hadn't yet appointed U Ba Khin as a teacher. A few years later, these were the war years, another extraordinary meeting took place. By now, U Ba Khin was chief accountant, chief auditor for the railways. And so he would travel up and down on the railway network. He had his own carriage, his own auditor's carriage, which he slept in, worked in, and he would just hook it up to trains and go wherever he wanted to do to audit the stations. He comes to a place called Charsi. The carriage is put in the siding, gets out to audit the station, and discovers that someone else has already audited it. So now he's stuck there for 2 days, doesn't know what to do, got nothing particular to do, goes for a walk with the assistant station master. Opposite there's a hill called Webu Hill, and at the bottom of it there's a bamboo hut. And he looks at this and he says, what's that? And the assistant station master said, oh, there's a monk who lives in that hut. He's a very developed monk. And U Ba Khin is very excited. He wants to go and meet this monk. And the station master says, wait, not yet. You won't see anybody yet. Wait till the afternoon. U Ba Khin goes back, meditates, has his lunch, sends metta to this monk, and sends a mental request, may I please come and visit you. In the afternoon he goes down with the assistant station master. The bamboo hut's there, the door's closed. There's an old lady pounding chilies. And he says to the old lady, I want to meet this monk. And she says, oh, you haven't got a chance. He won't come out till the evening. And he says, well, may I at least please go and pay respects? Yes, of course you can. So he goes to the hut, pays respects, and says, please, sir, please come out, sir. We have come all the way from Yangon. Please come out and meet us. The door opens, out comes Webu Sayadaw. Looks at U Ba Khin and says, what's your wish? What's your aspiration? To gain Nibbana, sir. And how will you do that? By Panya, sir, by the practice of anicca. And even while I'm talking to you now, sir, I'm with anicca. Oh. And Webu Sayadaw starts questioning him very closely. And long conversations, and Webu Sayadaw is astonished at the heights which U Ba Khin has already reached, even as a householder. And he says to him, I went into the forest for 4 years to reach the heights you've already reached. Long discussions. Again the next day, U Ba Khin comes back, gives Webu Sayadaw his meal, his breakfast, with permission. More long talks. And then Webu Sayadaw says, and now you must teach. Don't wait. Give Dhamma. Don't wait to give Dhamma, because those who are with you now, they might not get that opportunity in the future. Don't hesitate, teach now. And so U Ba Khin goes back, again with words ringing in his ears. His first student is the assistant station master in his carriage, teaches him Anapana. And U Ba Khin did start teaching, as we know, taught in the Accountant General's office with the permission of the Prime Minister. We know that story. Sooner or later, this small room in his office became too small. The centre was founded. And here U Ba Khin is on the left, in front of his own centre, IMC in Yangon, was just a few miles from the great Shwedagon Pagoda. And he was teaching, so again, another householder teacher. Sayatet was very pleased, no doubt. Had Sayatet appointed him, it would have been good, but nothing like the prestige and the backing of having a monk appoint him like Webu Sayadaw. And now he's been successfully teaching for some time, and Burma is in real trouble. The war is over, but there is insurrections, there are civil wars going on in the provinces, the government has almost lost control. There was a belief that in times of trouble, if you invited a very senior developed monk to the capital and he gave metta, gave Dhamma, this would ease the problems, they'd go away. And U Ba Khin said, well, let's invite Webu Sayadaw. No one had ever heard of Webu Sayadaw really before. He just stayed up near Mandalay in his 3 monasteries and just commuted between the 3 of them. But they said, all right. So U Ba Khin sends up his secretary with a message to Webu Sayadaw. The secretary tells a friend, the friend says, oh, you haven't a hope. He'll never come. He never leaves his 3 monasteries. He never accepts any invitations from householders. And it's very unusual for any monk to go and visit a householder's centre. Don't even bother. So the secretary goes, he meets Webu Sayadaw, who's having his lunch, waits patiently, and then he puts the question. Webu Sayadaw seems to be expecting him. Please, sir, I've come from my teacher, U Ba Khin. And U Ba Khin and Webu Sayadaw, after that initial meeting, had not met each other for over 10 years. So this was completely strange. And he says, please come down. He now has a centre, he's teaching at a centre. Please come down. Your paramis are so great, sir. Southern Burma needs you. Everybody's silent. What's he going to do? And he looks at the secretary and he says, well, maybe tomorrow's a bit early. How about the day after tomorrow? Everybody's astonished. U Ba Khin books the flights. Webu Sayadaw comes down with 6 monks, circumambulates the pagoda, gives Dhamma. U Ba Khin's students are sitting in the pagoda in the cells. Webu Sayadaw gives a discourse, stays there, and then all the leading lights of Burma start coming to U Ba Khin's centre and paying respects to Webu Sayadaw, and then he starts giving Dhamma. And Webu Sayadaw actually said that U Ba Khin actually launched his career as a teacher. So you get this wonderful support, with Webu Sayadaw supporting U Ba Khin, and U Ba Khin inviting Webu Sayadaw down year after year to give Dhamma and supporting him as a teacher. And at that time, the Prime Minister, U Nu, the same one who encouraged U Ba Khin to teach Dhamma in his office, decides to hold the 6th Great Sasana Council, again to purify the teaching. And again we see a connection between the establishment, the strong establishment, and the correction of the Pariyatti, and soon afterwards a strong spread of the technique again. So this was the 6th Great Council, a huge undertaking. From 1954 to 1956, the Burmese were very aware of the prophecy that after 2,500 years, Dhamma would start spreading strongly again, And this council was timed to end on that 2,500 years. U Ba Khin was closely involved. He was the chairman of the Patti Patti, the Practice Council. The whole thing was built in a few months, 170 acres, this huge hall, accommodation, a hospital, a library, offices, everything. And of course, a very successful conference. But something that came out of it was it attracted Westerners, some Westerners. Of course, many monks from different countries, Thailand, Sri Lanka, Cambodia, so forth, but also Westerners. And they wanted to learn Dhamma. And U Ba Khin was essentially the only Dhamma teacher in Yangon who spoke English properly. So they were all sent to him. And so suddenly U Ba Khin is teaching Dhamma not only to Burmese, but to Westerners. And then during this period, he gets another student, Goenkaji. And again, Goenkaji has told the story of how he came. Again, a disaster. Goenkaji's migraines, he's reached a dead end, and it pushes him, it forces him into the practice of Dhamma. He takes Dhamma, and we all know that story very well. Initially, U Ba Khin refused him until his motivation was proper, and then he spent years. At the same time, Goenkaji was very rich, very successful, big industrialist, big businessman, until another apparent disaster strikes him. By now, U Nu has moved on, and there's been a revolution in Burma. There's now a military government, and this military government decides they're going to nationalize the assets of all the leading industrialists. One day, Goenkaji is called into the office, and he leaves with nothing. All his assets are made over, his businesses, his bank accounts, the whole thing. He leaves penniless. Goes back home. That night, he goes round to Sayagyi's place, as he usually does for group sitting, comes in smiling. And Sayagyi says, Sayagyi knows what's happened. And he says, I see Dhamma has worked. And Goenkaji says, well, I feel as if I've been relieved of a huge burden. And then there are 5 golden years when he can spend full time with Sayagyi. Daily he's going in there, he's meditating. Sayagyi tells him, now go home, read this text, come back and tell me what you think of it tomorrow. Again, there's discussion. And of course he's being trained. He's Sayagyi's translator. Sayagyi's training him, checking. He gets him on one course giving Anapana, giving Vipassana. He gets him giving discourses. All that training is going on. And Sayagyi is very well aware, again, of the prophecy that Burma, having preserved this technique, would return it to India, and from there it would go around the world. And Sayagyi very keenly wanted to go to India and spread it himself, but he could never get a passport. At one point, one government official said, oh, just tell a few lies on your passport application. Don't worry, just say you're going for permanent job or for something like that. And don't worry, we know it's a lie, but we'll fix you the passport. And Sayagyi said, no, I'm never going to go on the basis of a broken Shila. So he didn't go. But after a while, Goenkaji wanted to go. And it was because his mother was ill at that time. She'd become very worried about her son still in Burma. She was in India by that time, in Mumbai. Both his parents were. And he wanted to give Dhamma to his mother, and he got a passport for that reason. And so he goes to India, and Sayagyi is thrilled. He says, you're not going, I'm going. You're going on my behalf. And you're going on Dhamma's behalf. This is not you that's spreading Dhamma. This is Dhamma spreading Dhamma. And so he goes to give the first course in India. It's said that as he touched the ground, as the plane touched the ground in Calcutta, there was an earthquake. A good sign, he thought. But when he arrives in Mumbai, he finds a very dark scene. His brothers, even though they'd previously taken courses with Sayagyi, are now practicing a totally different technique. They're practicing Ananda Marga. And his mother, although she's very sick, not well, she says, well, I would love to take a course from you. And she actually is a student of Sayagyi's herself, but never kept up the practice. But she says, I don't want to offend your brothers. And so, looks like a dead end, looks like darkness all around. He meditates and feels this darkness all around, but realizes his own mind is unaffected, he's equanimous. And then it seems as if there's some light somewhere. He comes out of his meditation. There's a man waiting for him, the nephew of an old acquaintance of his. And the man says, Sir, I hear you want to give a course in Mumbai. I have a site. Would you like to come and see it? So off he goes, and this vihara is produced, this resting house, boarding house, right in the middle of Bombay, amidst all the din, all the filth. The place itself is filthy, not been cleaned out for a long time, totally unsuitable. There's not even a proper room for the teacher. Goenkaji says, I'll take it. He knows how difficult it is to get a place. And now he's got a venue, a date is set, and various people, many of his relatives and others, start saying, oh, I'll come, I'll come. And then he's talking to his father, and he's saying to his father, well, the father is concerned about rites and rituals. He likes doing rites and rituals, and he doesn't want to give them up during the course. And Goenkaji says, well, why don't you get someone else to do your rites and rituals during the course? And you just meditate, come along to the course. And the father says, oh, that's a good idea. Okay, I'll come. And the brothers, although they're with Ananda Marga, they're not coming on the course, but they're not raising any opposition either. And then the mother says, all right, if your father's coming, I'll come too, but only for 5 days. So the course starts, just 14 students. And the accommodation is so dire that Goenkaji has no room of his own even. He just rigs up a curtain in the hall, and he's living behind the curtain in the hall, sharing a toilet with the students. The course is very successful. The mother stays the whole course. She gains huge benefit, and then course after course, course after course. As Goenkaji puts it, the Ganges of Dhamma starts flowing in its country of origin. And those courses were all in Hindi. But now the Westerners come along, and they say, well, we want a course in English, please. And Goenkaji says, no, he refuses them. He says, my English is not good enough for that. And so they complain. They complain to Sayagyi. And they say, look, your student is refusing to give us a course. Sayagyi writes to Goenkaji and says, you must teach them. Whatever English you know, it will be good enough. And so a course is arranged. And again, this first significant English course, there's a difficulty. Anapana goes okay. First discourse on the first night, Goenkaji feels horrible. He feels as if he's being suffocated. He can hardly even speak. Some horrible vibration from somewhere. He gives a very short discourse. Second night, discourse, again, the same thing. He feels as if he's being suffocated. Just a few minutes of discourse. Third day, he goes around checking the students, and he goes into the room which is actually next door to the hall where the owner of the villa was, the villa where they were having their course. He's going to check the student, and on the table he sees a skull, an animal skull, and a bloody knife. And he says, what's this? And the man said, oh, when my guru, my old guru, heard I was going on this course, he said, well, before the course, you must make an animal sacrifice and then keep the skull and the knife with you. It'll be very good for your meditation. And Goenkaji says, you have to get rid of that right now. And luckily, the man did. He went off, and the skull and the knife were buried in some cave far away, and then the course went just fine. Now, Sayagyi had also told Goenkaji that these campsite courses were okay, but really he needed a center. So Goenkaji's students were looking for a centre. And they were looking around the Bombay area because most of them came from that area. One time they took him out to Nasik to look at some sites there. Nothing special, nothing particular. He's driving back in the car with his students. He's flagged down in the village of Igatpuri by some more of his students. And they invite him in for a cup of tea. And then they say, well, sir, we hear you're looking for a site for a centre. We'd like to show you some sites here. And Goenkaji is not actually very pleased because he's not mobile. He's got a broken leg. His leg's in plaster. He can't walk far. But nevertheless, he agrees. He goes. They show him a couple of sites. And no, not suitable. Then they say, well, there's just one more, sir. Please come and have a look at this one. It's up a hill, not easy to climb. And it's Damagiri. 17 acres, pretty rough, just a few abandoned huts, old farmers, farmhands' huts, nothing else. But he looks at it and he says, yes, this will do. So they all drive home, very happy. Goenkaji goes home, all the students go home except one. He goes straight to the owner of the land and he says, what's the price? And you might be thinking of the way Anata Pindika bought that land by spreading gold on it. The price of the land, the normal price of that land was about 1,000 rupees per acre. This was 17 acres, so 17,000 rupees. And the owner says, I want 85,000 rupees, an outrageous price. The student pulls out his checkbook, writes the check for 85,000 rupees, the land is bought, and this was Damagiri, the mother centre. Today, if you go there, it holds courses for 500, 700 students at a time. Just imagine the merits of that check. And now Goenkaji is very aware of the prophecy that Dhamma will be established in India and has to spread around the world. So he's now thinking elsewhere. In the very early days of his time in India, one of his very first students, very early students, came to him, a lady called Tara Miquel, a French lady, and said, please come to France and give a course in France. And he said, wait 10 years, then ask me again. Now 10 years were up. She comes again and says, please come and give a course in France, 10 years are up. And he says, yes, okay, I'll try. And now, as always, there's a difficulty and a major difficulty. He has a Burmese passport, and the Burmese passport is endorsed for one country only, which is India. So he can't leave India except to go back to Burma. And he thinks, well, maybe they'll endorse it for more. But government policy, this was the military government, was that you never endorsed a passport for more than one country. Goenkaji appeals to the ambassador. The ambassador doesn't even dare send the request back to Burma. He appeals to the head of the military government, who's a personal friend of his, Colonel Mongmong. Colonel Mongmong never even replies. Later, very embarrassed, he tells Goenkaji, I'm sorry, I cannot change government policy on this. So Goenkaji's talking with a friend of his, and the friend says, all right, well, you can't get a Burmese passport. I know you'd like to use a Burmese passport out of respect for your motherland. Why not get an Indian passport? And that'll give you free travel everywhere. And Goenkaji says, all right, I'll try to get an Indian passport. And the friend says, to make sure you get one, why not take a Satya Adhitthana? A Satya Adhitthana. Those of you who've taken long courses might have heard of this. Satya is truth. Adhitthana is determination. A developed person states a truth and says, by the power of this truth, may such and such a Dhamma outcome happen. And in this case, Goenkaji's Satya Adhitthana was, all the time that I've been giving these courses in India, it has never been for my benefit, but always for the benefit of others. And by this truth, may I get an Indian passport. And on the strength of that Satya Adhitthana, he starts accepting the invitation. And this Tara Miquel organizes a whole tour for him, not just one course, 2 courses in France, 1 in Canada, 2 in England. Sites are booked, students are booked, all advertised. And Goenkaji still hasn't even got citizenship. And there's a problem. The problem is that his brothers were members of this sect, Ananda Marga. And this Ananda Marga sect had a reputation for political violence. And so they were deeply suspected by the Indian government. One of the brothers had even been in jail before. And so the intelligence department had them under surveillance. And so also Goenkaji was under surveillance because he was their brother. And they could not believe that all these courses that he were giving were not some kind of front for the Ananda Marga. So nothing was happening with his citizenship. The application is in there. The courses have been booked to start on the 1st of July. On the 22nd of June, just 8 or so days before, is the anniversary of his first arrival, the 10th anniversary of his first arrival in India. Nothing's happened. The 23rd passes, the 24th, the 25th, the 26th, the 27th. Nothing's happened. Goenkaji is totally despairing. This huge tour may have to be cancelled. And then suddenly, on the 27th, he gets a call. Please come to the courthouse at Bombay and collect your citizenship papers. So he goes to the courthouse. He's still totally despondent, because even if you're a citizen, a passport application takes weeks, if not months. And then what about that French visa? So he goes, collects his citizenship papers, goes out. As he goes out, the travel agent's there. He says, please sir, give me your citizenship papers, I'll fix this. Next day, the travel agent comes round. He's got a passport, and it's got a French visa inside it. Goenkaji's ready to go. Now, what happened? Sometime earlier, a few days before, his third son, Murari, had been talking to the father of his wife, a man named Mr. Muraka. And Mr. Muraka was a senior member of the Indian government. He was actually a cabinet minister. And they were talking about Goenkaji's difficulties with citizenship and passport. And Muraka says, well, this doesn't sound right. I'm going to go and talk to my friend, the Prime Minister, Morarchi Desai. So Muraka goes to Delhi, meets Morarchi Desai, talks about this problem. Morarchi Desai is a little bit puzzled, and he says, oh, well, I'll look up his file. So he calls for the file, and then he says, I'm sorry, nothing I can do. He's under surveillance with the intelligence department. I'm helpless. And then Muraka rounds on him, and he says, look, you've had this man under surveillance for years. He's done nothing wrong. He's never put a foot wrong. And you have nothing on him at all. Why do you keep doing this? And then he eyeballs him, and he says, do you think that we would have let our daughter marry into this man's family without making inquiries? And Morarchi Desai is dumbfounded. He says, oh, yes, well, maybe you've got a point. So he issues an order, Prime Minister's order, close the file on Goenkaji, close that file. And then he issues another order to his visa and citizenship department saying, do everything you need to do to get that man on his plane. And that's what happened. And so Goenkaji goes out. That very night, he flies off, the course starts. It's a very successful course, a very successful tour. And then, again, course after course, tour after tour, America, Australia, Europe. And of course, there's still the demand in India. And he's getting exhausted. He can't keep giving courses single-handedly. He goes on these huge tours, big numbers, he comes back, and then the Indians want him here. He realizes he has to delegate. And now we get the first appointment of assistant teachers. He calls 8 of his most senior students, 4 Indians, 4 Westerners. Here are the 4 Westerners. And he says, now I want you to start teaching and giving courses. And initially, everyone was wondering, well, how will that go? This has never happened before. This is most unusual. But now we cannot imagine how Dhamma would spread without assistant teachers. And in those first 2 years, the assistant teachers he's appointed gave 100 courses, and it just went on from there. And again, Dhamma worked. What the assistant teachers needed were tapes. In those days, it was old cassette tapes. And the right person appeared at the right time, Thomas Christman. Here he is, on the right, with his video cam. And he goes to Goenkaji and he says, well, look, your assistant teachers, they're going to need tapes to conduct all these courses. May I come and record you? At first, Goenkaji is very hesitant. And Thomas says, look, I'll be as quiet as a mouse. And he was. So a familiar sight for the next 6 years was Thomas coming to Dhammagiri every year, recording Goenkaji again and again, sitting beside him, surrounded by instruments and lights, and recording Goenkaji again and again until he got it perfect. And then he issues with his own dana suitcases of cassette tapes to all the assistant teachers as they're appointed. And so it continues. The assistant teacher regime continues. And how fortunate we were to have that opportunity to spread Dhamma. And later on, another realization by this teacher, Thomas Christman, he's passed away now, was the importance of the internet and how that would matter. And he was the first person to see that and to persuade Goenkaji that an internet presence would be so important. So Goenkaji's touring the West, but he would also like to go back to Burma. He hasn't been back to Burma ever since he left. And again, there's a blockage, a problem. And it's because he took an Indian passport. The Indian passport was wonderful in the sense that it gave him access to almost any country around the world. But by taking an Indian passport, as far as the Burmese government, this military government was concerned, he was a traitor. He'd renounced Burmese citizenship, and he could never be allowed back into Burma again. And this was his motherland, and it really hurt him. But he was helpless. What could he do? And then again, Dhamma works. Colonel Mong Mong, the very president of Burma, of the military government, who had rejected his Burmese passport application, was visiting India, visiting his daughter in Delhi. And the daughter was going to go up to see Goenkaji at Jaipur and said, well, Father, why don't you come along with me? So he does. Mong Mong meets Goenkaji. Goenkaji's about to start a course in Jaipur, and he says, well, you've got free time now. Why not join the course? Mong Mong joins the course, sits 10 days, and is thrilled. And he goes back home and he says to all his military colleagues, his friends, you must invite this man back. He's doing nothing wrong. He's extremely respectful of Burma. He's respectful of Dhamma, respectful of the Buddha. He is a wonderful son of Burma. We should invite him back as a state guest. And so at that time, Goenkaji was actually giving a course here at Dhammabhumi. He was giving a Satipatthana course, the very one which you can hear recorded today. And suddenly he gets a phone call from the Burmese ambassador in Canberra. We'd like you to come to Burma as a state guest. Goenkaji is thrilled. So immediately preparations are made. That photo of him and Mataji is actually at Sydney Airport, about to board his plane for Yangon. He goes back to Yangon, gives Dhamma talks attended by large numbers. Next year, again he goes, he's giving courses now in Burma as well, back in his motherland. He's given high honours in Burma. He's awarded a very high, prestigious honor, given a large sum of money, which he immediately donates for the first center in Burma. And that opens the gates to all of East Asia, Southeast Asia, all these other countries, Taiwan, Thailand, Hong Kong, Singapore, Cambodia, and so forth. And so now Goenkaji is traveling worldwide, course after course, course after course. And perhaps the highlight of his teaching career was this opportunity in New York. It was also part of 2 very successful tours of America. Kofi Annan was the General Secretary of the United Nations at that time, and Kofi Annan decides to hold a Millennium Peace Conference for all the religious leaders of the world. So they're all there, the Hindus, the Sikhs, the Christians, the Parsis, the Jews, Muslims, everybody. And big debates going on among these leaders, 100 of them. And quite soon the conversation got bogged down. It was about conversion. Some people were for conversion, some people were against conversion. The debate was going nowhere. And then Goenkaji is asked to speak. Quite a short talk, he's not given that much time. It's a busy conference. And he starts off, you can hear the talk today, it's recorded. He starts off by saying, I am for conversion, emphatically for conversion, but not conversion from one religion to another. Conversion from misery to happiness, from bondage to liberation. And he goes on like that. And very soon he's getting standing ovations, sometimes even between sentences. He unifies the conference. People are thrilled. He's running out of time now. He's reminded of the time. And then he says, well, maybe just one more thing. Please give me just a few more minutes. And then he quotes the great Ashoka. Anyone who seeks to demean another religion, thinking he'll glorify his own, actually digs the grave of his own religion. Ashoka's words. So, a wonderful opportunity for Goenkaji, a huge peak in the spread of Dhamma. And now, he's getting old. One of his last great ambitions, volitions, is to build a huge monument of gratitude to Sayagyi, his teacher. He always understands that whenever he gives Dhamma, he feels that actually Sayagyi is giving Dhamma. I'm just an instrument, Sayagyi is working through me. And also, he wants to make this monument a place where Buddha's relics could also be interred and kept safe. And he was very well aware of another understanding, another prophecy, that as long as Buddha's relics were remained and were preserved in the world, so Buddha's teachings would also be preserved. So he was very careful to preserve the relics. He wanted to build this huge monument. And basically, it was a copy of the Shwedagon. It was the same size, but just 1 foot shorter, out of respect for the Shwedagon and for Burma. But there was one great difference. The Shwedagon was solid. You remember it contained those 8 hairs inside, Buddha's hairs. But Goenkaji wanted this to be a hollow structure where people could meditate, and the relics would be held in the roof, and people could meditate under the relics. And he wanted something that would last for centuries. Now, how to do that? The conventional structure, of course, was steel and concrete, but that would not last for centuries. Someone came to him and said, well, if you really want to make this last a long time, you have to build it out of stone. Now, how to build a hollow structure out of stone? And this student, he's brought along some bars of soap and a knife. And he uses the knife to carve the soap, the bars of soap, into interlocking shapes. And he says, this is how you can do it. You build the structure with all these interlocking circular shapes, each stone supporting the next, and there are people who know how to do this. There are people in Rajasthan, a whole tribe of temple builders who can do this for you. Goenkaji agrees, and so this structure is built. It's massive. The internal span of the dome is 90 meters. That is twice the span of any other unsupported span in the world. Even the great Basilica of St. Peter's in Rome is half that size. So a huge place. You can go and meditate there today, sit one-day courses, sit group sittings, and meditate under those relics. Highly recommended. And there's an art gallery, there's a research institute there, there's a center there, an executive center. So this great monument is built. It's opened by the President of India, because Goenkaji is getting old now. And one of the last ceremonies or occasions he has there is what he calls a gratitude ceremony. He invites all his students, and he wants to express to them, especially to his leading students, those who've supported him, his gratitude to them. Of course, we should be grateful. He gave us Dhamma. But here he is saying, I'm grateful to you, because if you had not come and listened to me, how could I have developed my paramis? Just a few years later, he's now old, his health is failing. He passes away on the 29th of September, 2013. By that time, he was confined to a wheelchair. He wasn't very mobile. Many doctors' visits, not healthy, not well. That particular day, again, a doctor's visit. After the doctor's gone, he says to Mataji, now I am relieved of all these doctors. At the time, Mataji thought nothing of it. Lunch passes quietly, virtually in silence. Afternoon is quiet. Supper, he's silent. He retires soon after supper, goes to bed. About 10 or 11 o'clock, his breathing becomes faster and his heart stops. He's passed away. And the atmosphere is peaceful, serene. There is no sign of any pain, any stress, nothing like that on his face. He's cremated soon afterwards. His ashes are scattered in the Irrawaddy River in Burma, uniting him forever in his motherland. And those words below, impermanent, all compounded things, you hear them in the Pali every time you take a course. They're a translation of that verse, Anicca Vata Sankhara. And this is the legacy. At the time of his passing away, something like 130 centers all around the world, 65 countries, 800 assistant teachers, over 1 million students have taken Dhamma, either directly with him or from his words. His instructions have been translated into something like 30 different languages. And when you look at that map, you see the dots everywhere. The only place where there's no dots on this map is India, because you couldn't fit all the dots in there. And finally, from Goenkaji, Dhamma will spread. No force on earth can stop it. As Sayagyi said, the time clock of Vipassana is struck. And we are so fortunate that they're within this living tradition, that we have this technique, we have the words, and we have the opportunity to spread it ourselves. Thank you.